All right. Thank you everyone for joining. Good evening to all. My name is Yashna. With me there's Akshay Rumta. We're from Uloy Labs, and we'll be moderating this session today. Rethinking education evaluation with the idea of using qualitative data. I just want everybody to, whoever has joined, please share your name, your organization, and a little bit about you so we can all see who all are in the room. Um, this and while we will do that, we will get started with what's the agenda for today. And just very quickly introducing what we do at Uloy Labs, and the Open Knowledge Framework is a tool that we are building. And we're very, very passionate about reshaping how organizations evaluate and make decisions. Today is one of those conversations that we want to have with folks we've worked with the past and who have been already questioning a lot of the standard ways of evaluation, and we'll deep dive into the role of qualitative data and it plays in the education evaluation space, exploring not just the challenges but also how do you potentially uncover insights that numbers alone can't reveal. So the format of this webinar is informal conversations. We are not doing any formal presentation other than this introduction. But the idea is that over the next hour and a half, we'll hear from three incredible speakers who are thought leaders and practitioners in this space. We'll ask them and we'll talk to them about the role. Pradhana, if you can just go to the topics. We'll just talk about the role of qualitative data in their work, stories and triggers that sparked their focus on qualitative data, challenges qualitative data addresses in the sector, the strategies for integrating qualitative data into evaluation frameworks, how they've used and how are they formalizing it in their processes, and how can we shift mindsets and in future where qualitative and quantitative data together work hand in hand to transform education evaluation. Just a note, we are not going to talk about student evaluation specifically today. It might come in conversations and how people are doing, but that's not the primary focus for today. Let me very quickly introduce the speakers that we have today. Adhishree is the Director of Communications at Global School Leaders. Adhishree has spent over a decade in the education sector in India and brings wide-ranging experiences in design, research, facilitation, and community building. Before joining Global School Leaders, Adhishree was the senior strategist at Subbu and Rakshay, the design for social impact firm, and her role was to help social impact organizations develop effective communication strategies to strengthen the impact of their interventions. Adhishree previously has worked as a senior manager for alumni and partnerships at Teach for India as a strategic consultant for Teach for Bangalore and a curriculum design consultant with Generation. Adhishree was a 2011 Teach for India Fellow and holds a master's in international business and emerging markets from the University of Edinburgh. Thank you so much, Adhishree, for joining. The next speaker we have is Radhika. Radhika heads the partnerships in women empowerment at Naandi Foundation. Prior to this, she ran Nanhi Kali, a post-school support program for girls in government schools across the country. She believes in education. She believes that education can create lasting impact and work towards enhancing the support of Project Nanhi Kali that provides to equip rural and urban girls of India with tools to flourish in the 21st century. In a previous life, Radhika worked for 2 decades in the Indo-French business space as a translator and a consultant. Again, thank you so much, Radhika, for taking this time out today and speak to us. And our last guest is Tanvi. Tanvi heads the research and M&E function at Quest Alliance. She leads a multidisciplinary team of researchers, evaluators, and data analysts that work together to promote an impact-first approach and data-driven culture within the organization. Prior to joining Quest in 2019, she worked in a social enterprise called Rangde as a chief impact officer Tanvi has spent nearly 11 years in the development sector across multiple teams such as communications, operations, and M&E. She holds a postgraduate diploma from IIM Indore and began her career with the leading media company before switching over the development sector. She is interested in exploring how tech advancements are impacting and likely to impact issues of privacy, human rights, and equity. We're incredibly fortunate to have all of you with us today, and I'm sure your insights are going to leave our audience inspired and equipped with some actionable insights. So, really looking forward to this conversation today. And again, once again, thank you so much for everyone who's come in and you're a part of this webinar. Just a few quick before we start, a few quick housekeeping notes. We encourage that you all stay engaged and ask questions. You can drop your question in the chat board and save them, or really save them for the end of the session. Also a point here, we've collated some of the key questions that came during the registration process. We have put that as a part of the question answer session. So some of those questions will be addressed. And the second point is that the session is recorded. After this session, we will be sharing the recording with you all and any additional resources that get mentioned during the webinar. So we'll be collating all that and sharing that with you. Yeah, with that, let's get started. And let's, as we promised, it's not going to be this presentation format workshop. It's more of a conversation that we want to have with three speakers. And honestly, you're all open to share in chat anything specific that has that's something that you're waiting for. Cool. So just to get started, I want to just start with qualitative data in general, and how qualitative data has played up in the day-to-day, and what are the different forms of qual data that you've seen in the work you do. And just starting us off, Adhishree, if you can share a little bit about what you've seen at Global School Leaders, or maybe before that, and just share a little about the work as well as what forms of qualitative data that you've seen in the day-to-day.
Great. Thanks, Yashna, and hello, everyone. I'm home with my parents, and I told them that I have to step into a webinar around qualitative data, and they were like, why are you talking about data? Because I've always been a storyteller, and so this is why I've told them, please join the webinar, so they might show up. But really excited to be here, and really excited to be in conversation also with Radhika and Tanvi. So I'm here representing an organization called Global School Leaders. And very simply, what we do is we try and strengthen school leadership ecosystems in countries in the global south. So thinking about who your school principal was and if she or he was really prepared for the role. That's the question that we're really concerned with. And it bothers us that a lot of the school principals today aren't really ready for their role. And I think one of the key bits is because there isn't any quantitative data that clearly draws a line that if you have a really, really good school principal, student outcomes improve. I think we all know that because it makes sense that a good leader means everything else happens well. But I think the way then money and resources flow, people need data to prove that. And I think that's where sort of I think this idea of qualitative data, narrative building, storytelling, I think all of that kind of plays a huge role in the way we then present what we do and the cases that we present in front of people. And I just sort of made a list of a couple of things that we do to kind of put qualitative data front and center. And then, of course, we'll have more time to chat about the challenges and everything that comes with it. I think one of the biggest sort of pivotal moments in the organization was actually the pandemic, where schools were shut and suddenly the school principal role completely changed. So from being this person that you want to avoid at all costs because you were in a principal's office because you got into trouble, to somebody who had suddenly become not just a school leader, but a community leader because schools transformed during that period. And there was no way for us to go out there and collect only quantitative data to make a case for, look, they're here, they don't know what to do, and we have to invest time and resources to support them. And I think that's where the organization also sort of woke up to say that, no, we need sort of a mixed methods approach to really make a case for what school principals need and how effective they can be. So when a school principal has everything, just that story of how that happens and how that unfolds really, really matters. And so that kind of then backtracked into how we collect these narratives, how we talk to people. And one of the things that emerged from that was Principal Speak, which is a platform that we've been developing with Uloy Labs, which is an open platform for principals to come and just share stories. And it's available in 5 languages. And so you're having principals say, oh, today was a tough day on their way back from school, to somebody just spending 3 months doing like a really rigorous project and then saying, okay, this is what I've learned from it. And so those are just some of the ways that we've been trying to do this. We also do something called the Pulse Survey, which is promoting understanding of school leadership, which is a survey that we send out to principals all over the global south. And of course, there's a quantitative aspect of it. But over the past 3 years that we've done it, it hasn't really landed because people don't know what to make of the fact that 85% of school principals are very stressed. We know that because aren't we all? But why are they particularly stressed? And that's where sort of the qualitative column of that survey comes into play, where we take that, we analyze that, and actually create almost a covering for the numbers to say, okay, this is why it matters. And so these are just some of the ways that it's become more and more important for us in our work. I think it was always a little bit here and there, but I think it's come very front and center in the past couple of years at Global School Leaders.
Super, super. And as you said, it's really understanding the why behind the numbers, and that's what the data can be about. Just to also ask Radhika and Tanvi if there's any other form of qualitative data that you've seen at the work that you've been doing, just if you can share a little more on that.
Just briefly, we'll go into my program later, but I think qualitative data until very recently has been only used to sort of do internal impact evaluations, right? Just trying to figure out what's working, what's not working, and it was not really being deployed, supercharged with numerical data behind it to actually tell stories in a very data-enabled qualitative stories and narratives to be built out of it. So I think that is sort of the transformation that we've seen. I'll speak more about it, but yeah, I think earlier we were just sticking to small surveys.
Yeah, I mean, usually we've seen qualitative data as like 10 people getting questioned about why that happened, and that's the sample, and that's what it matters.
It's like a focus group of 15 people, and you do 3 such, and then it's done. Whereas, the program is so huge, you want to be able to actually talk about it at the scale that the program is, and for that you need, proper data backing to support the narratives that come out of these sessions.
Yeah, true, makes sense.
I think just echoing what Radhika and Adhishree already spoke about, I think the how of it is what qualitative data really brings and enhances the story. I think and again, I think sometimes, especially in the last 5 odd years, I feel we've walked away from evaluation with more questions than answers also, because you're just wondering, wow, why are the results the way they are without qualitative data to kind of back the story up, right? So I think where mixed methodology can bring in that value of trying to explain why certain things happened. And I think that's something that we've been more cognizant of over time, and we've learned from our own shortcomings that we've had in the past in terms of the design that we've kind of followed. So yeah, I'll stop here, Jasha.
Yeah. Just to follow up, I think Radhika, to you, and maybe that's when you can also share a little about your experience at Naani. Like, what triggered the need for qual data in your work? And I know we've spoken about a lot of anecdotes that you've had while you were on ground. So just sharing a little about those would be really, really useful with others.
Yeah. So I'm relatively new to the development sector. I think it's a good place to start and to just say why I felt the need. Because I don't come with 20 years of experience in the development sector, right? I come with 20 years of experience in the corporate sector. So I started off with Nanikali and started traveling to, so Nanikali is a post-school support program for girls in government schools. It's 2 hours of, it used to be 2 hours of academic support, but we've pivoted to life skills support and sports. So it's in schools every day, and we had a presence in 5,000 schools across 20 districts, and working with 6,500 frontline staff who are the DDs, the tutors. And we supported, we still support 1.8 lakh girls, right? So it's a program at scale. And which is what I was alluding to when I was talking earlier, is that you can have narratives, but you want to know how representative they really are. So I'll give you a couple of examples. So I'd go to the field, and anybody in, any program officer in any district will take you to obviously the best schools that they have with the most active girls and so on. So you go there, and the girls are flinging questions at you. They're not even waiting for you to ask questions. They're answering, and so on and so forth. And you think, wow, these girls are so confident, right? And you want to know whether this is something that you're seeing, that it's just a selected sample, or whether this is really true across the program. And if so, how true is it? Is it 20% of girls who come away with confidence? Is it 30? Is it 80? And it makes a huge difference to be able to say that.
Yeah.
On the other hand, the other thing that I was hearing is, I was also hearing different aspects of empowerment, right? One is, like I said, confidence. You talk to principals or headmasters, headmistresses, and they say, these girls weren't participating before, but now they participate in all the school programs. They're always, like, there is always a group of Nanikalis who's going to perform at the school annual day, for example. Or they'll say, these girls were not passing before, now they're passing their exams, or now they're standing first, second, and third in school. And then there is the sports part of it. We had a small part of the program that used to be sports, where we had girls who would travel because of the sports program. And we would hear things like, oh, hum is share ki bahar nahi jaye, but our children have gone bahar tak, like they've gone airplane leke Delhi jaake wo khel ke aayi hai, So you start seeing that empowerment and an understanding of, or rather a societal acceptance of girls traveling and girls playing sports, and girls doing certain number of things was building. But in no way were we able to capture any of this except in all these interactions. So that was also where when we came across stories from the ground, Ola Labs' this tool of actually collecting qualitative data in narrative format from across our locations. It spoke to us, and we said, okay, this is something that we should use.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, I think what you said specifically on what is the representation of that one voice that you've been taken to. Often these samples are like, hey, you have to select probably an extreme user or like a average user, and you don't know which one is an extreme user, what is the scale of the extreme user, right? And I remember this was a field visit that we'd done where long ago, where we interviewed somebody who was an extreme user, and that extreme user was extremely intelligent, or like very very well versed with tech and such, and we were like, are we building it wrong? Because that's the level. But so much went into really saying that we need to really validate how many are there, of such kind, and is it like a 10% extreme, or like 50% fall under that bracket? And there's a whole sampling methodology also that we end up understanding, while but often ignored, because you're like, FGD happens with only 10 people, you don't know how that 10 people has been selected. So yeah, I think that is very, very valid, where when you end up going and interviewing people, you just always split that what is the representation of this particular person, and how do you really validate, and then call for scale really is important in that way, for sure. But just also opening to Adhishree and Tanvi, if there are some anecdotes that you feel led for you to be like, this has to be done at scale, and this has to be done properly.
I can share. I think Quest Alliance, I'll just start with mentioning what we do at Quest. Quest Alliance is a Bangalore based organization, and we work with young people primarily on 21st century skills. We work with government schools and ITIs across 11 states in the country. Um, and I think one of the things definitely that has been a constant struggle is how do you measure and quantify 21st century skills, right? A lot of what we are trying to shift is actually mindsets and attitudes of young people, of educators, of what Adhishi referred to, the heads of institutions as well, right? Um, and I think one of the challenges that we face, especially with trying to do large scale surveys, quantitative data, is there's always that fear that the social desirability aspect of that, people are giving you the responses that they expect, they think are expected out of them, especially when it comes to notions of gender equity, of diversity, inclusion in a classroom, etc. Right? So how do you kind of then gauge this in a fair manner? Classroom observation is one form of qualitative data that can tell you, but how do you kind of make sure that you're able to hear through this and hear this through more diverse representative voices? So I think to just you give an example of an experience, and this is something that one of our team members from the schools team was sharing, was um, the conversation that she had with an educator who had undergone one of the intervention programs, and it led to her questioning her own attitude to how she had been teaching all these years, and the notions of the program allowing her to question the pedagogical practices that she had been following, and the notion of multiple intelligences and different types of learning, that behavior that learners might exhibit, which allowed her to improve her own practices, make sure that her classroom was structured or designed in a manner which allowed for more types of learners to participate and engage in learning. I don't think if we relied solely on quantitative data, none of this, or what is a possibly a transformative experience she's gone through, would have emerged, right? And I think that's where personally I feel is the value of qualitative data. How do you use this insight to create such more transformative experiences to trainings or whatever we are trying to design, right? So I think that's where personally I feel this value of qualitative data. I'll stop here, Yasha.
Super. Yeah. Adhishree, you have something to add?
Sure. I think I was just thinking about the triggering of this, and I don't know how many of you know this, but a couple of years ago there was a fantastic book that was released called Desperately Seeking Shah Rukh Khan, which is just, I think, my Bible when it comes to just what you can do with qualitative data. And I remember thinking, okay, who is the Shah Rukh Khan in school leadership, right? Like, how do I begin conversations? Because like both Radhika and Tanvi have shared, everybody has a pretty set script. Even if you do the sampling, even if you go and go to the margins, go to the middle, like it's everybody knows how to do this, especially in the education sector, because they have so many people coming and talking to them. And I think one of the things that moved from anecdotal to qualitative was sort of visiting a school, and we were just having chai, and one of the school principals said, she just showed me her green pen, and she's like, you know what, like every day I use one green pen. That's the amount of paperwork I have, right? And what that led to was us actually like, okay, should we just start a green pen campaign and get data on, okay, how many green pens do you use? which then kind of complemented our big statistic around the amount of time school principals spend in administrative duties when they actually have to be in classrooms and supporting teachers and understanding what children do. And so if I tell you that, 95% of school principals spend over 80% of the time in administrative tasks, you're going to be like, okay, sure. But if I tell you a school principal uses one green pen a day, then that opens up a very different dialogue. It opens up a different opening, whether you're sitting in front of a funder or if you're sitting in front of somebody who you want to kind of enroll in a program. And I think that's where sort of this trigger came in to say, like, how can we be creative and just also real with some of this, because the humanizing aspect is something that is just too overdone sometimes, so that we feel like we know everybody in the education space. But I think there's so much nuance there that qualitative data allows us to get into.
Wow. That's one. I mean, that's the story I'm going to remember. This green pen one. I don't think anybody's going to forget, to be honest. Like, but that's such a powerful way to look at any kind of. I don't want to use the word data, but also like really nuance that is there in everyday school leader's life or like a student's life and such. So just to, I think you also share a little on what it can do and impact knowing this data, like having this kind of data or nuance in decision making. And just a question to all of you: what is the potential of using qualitative data in decision making in this sector specifically, and what have you seen? Have you like scratched this? Where are you also in unpacking or unlocking this potential, to be honest?
I think I can start. I think for us, what we've been trying to do is to actually look at quality data to inform our program theory of change. I think while we do our standard outcome evaluations, impact evaluation, certain frequency, and they do try help us understand, what is the kind of update and refinement you need to make in light of, changing circumstances or environments, etc. Um, I think what a lot of the nuances and as both the other panelists have mentioned, a lot of the nuances, a lot of the rapid changing external environment, those insights, etc., really do come from the qualitative insights. So I think where we've been trying to use, at least in our programming, is to actually look at it to how do we make sure that our theory of change is getting is in line with current realities, trends, is relevant for the stakeholders that we are trying to kind of service, and make sure that whatever we are designing from a future lens is also relevant. So I think for us, it's more for internal reflective practice at this point of just being able to tweak design elements, offerings, services, etc., that we work in.
Tanvi, also, is there like within the internal organization, is there like a state level or like district level changes that you've seen, or like potential that you see that can happen versus maybe um, overall program design level? Like, do you have you seen those different ways in which the data could actually change or impact or within Questalans?
I think one of the examples that I think I can share that comes to mind is really, I think, again, based on a recent conversation that we were having with an educator, where again I think we refer to the workload that principals manage, but another, and I'm sure all of us who work in the education sector are aware of this as well, is just the number of trainings and inputs that teachers receive. So one of the things that I remember one of the educators telling us that she was actually listening to one webinar from one particular CSO in using one earphone, and the other one she was actually plugged into some other CSO trying to kind of tell her to change her practices or teach certain things same way, right? I think what that definitely, that very crisp input a criticism to the sectoral adage that she kind of gave us, also led us to kind of think about how do we look at design. Is there a better way of actually doing capacity building which does not involve webinars or getting people into workshops, etc.? Is there can we be imaginative and push the boundaries in what could upskilling and capacity building look like? And therefore, what kind of maybe asynchronous resources we could provide them, which allow them to, choose topics that they are excited about rather than, being forced to kind of sign up for trainings that they don't see value in. So I think that definitely was one thing that, has pushed our own imaginations and boundaries. So that's one example I can think of.
Yeah, super. Just also, Radhika, I know you had something if you want to just share.
So, so I think the key for us is your program is what you measure. And if you measure academics, yours is an academic support program. If you measure empowerment, you're an empowerment program. And this was a dilemma that Nanikali was facing, I think, for a long time, is that because we work with girls from 6 to 16, we were necessarily within a school environment. And it's an empowerment program working through education. But it's easy to measure marks. So we were measuring marks and we were reporting marks and we were reporting attendance, we were reporting amount of time spent in our after school sessions. So that's what the program became. However, when I was traveling the program across the country, I started to question whether this education, this extra support that we were giving was actually empowering the girls. Or was it an extension of what they were already getting in school, right? Sit down and study. Is it really empowering? And to what extent? Of course, it was having academic impact, right? We were delivering twice the usual. So if you looked at the National Achievement Survey, you know that we have a half grade per year of grade level change year on year for children across the country. We were achieving one. So it's not that the program didn't have an impact, but it was, if we were to look at Nanikali as an empowerment program, I'm not sure if it was empowering. So this kind of qualitative lens or impact lens that we were applying to it made us actually re-question and switch to, of course, given that NEP also lays such a strong focus on life skills, we switched into what actually empowered girls more, which came out of our qualitative survey that we had done a few years ago. And we now do life skills training. Like, for example, it's no longer math, but it is how do you understand debt? How do you understand loans? What are interest rates and so on? To enhance the support, the education that they're already getting in schools. And this came out of a qualitative study, it didn't come out of quantitative. So it actually was a fundamental change in our entire program design that was led by qualitative data.
Wow. And again, another statement that's going to stay is your program is what you measure. And this is, I feel with the organizations we've worked often, they also come to this realization that what's easy to measure, we end up measuring that, but the program was not meant for it. It's just that something had to be measured and we're ending up measuring that. So I think call data for us was also, if we're measuring the right things, or at least the ones which were intended to measure. And often what comes in that when you start measuring what you should be measuring, there's so many cross-cutting narratives that come up, and you unpack so much more at the program design levels. You like things like association of I think, Radhika, one of the things that you've always mentioned, that if I'm if a girl is feeling unsafe because there's no street light, you can't necessarily get from how many marks the girl has got, and it's an after school program. I need to make sure that there's light after the school gets over. So I think that's such a powerful thing that and you can't unpack that from just saying that I have made a list of options but you have to select. I need to know those reasons beyond the regular. And I think that is definitely something that is going to stay. Also, I feel just one thing that I wanted to add was we've, on this point of Tanvi, what you were speaking, and also otherwise, where we've seen stuff which is like stuff like street light, right? That being a reason for girls to not come in a particular district. That's a local decision. And that if at a local level I make something visible for a district team, right, and at a central level I'm making it visible for another team, there is so much data can inform at different districts, blocks, central, state, and program design can be at that large level, but there's like these micro improvements that keep happening to ensure impact is happening. And like really, if it's to do with girl education, really focusing on that and empowering it's not just about marks. Then how do you really empower? What are those other aspects that you change within those 2 3 different levels of programs? um yeah, I think just leading into, like, since we understand, we've touched upon call data potential, but qualitative data is not easy to work with, and those are reasons why we've not done this at scale. Organizations do it. It is, even though, I mean, quant data is also not easy. Quantitative itself is a task, and the point that, just to for you all to also share what are the challenges. And Tanvi, since you also come from the impact space in the last 10 years or more, like, how, what are the challenges of call data that you've seen, if you can start us off, and how do you navigate? It's not just about pointing those challenges, like how do you navigate those challenges in collecting and interpreting qualitative data? If you can share some of the misconceptions also, and then I'll open it to Adhishree and Radhika, you as well.
I think we did speak a little bit from of the challenges from in the beginning. I think
Yeah.
definitely the being the fear is always, you're kind of mistaking the forest for the tree, tree for the forest rather. Than this one story which kind of gets stuck in your head, is it kind of becoming overtly important, or are you actually giving it undue importance? Is that an exception versus? And I think Yashna, you also mentioned it
Yeah.
as well. So there's always that fear whether the insights that you've heard are truly representative, right? And especially when you're giving at scale, we know India, even within a particular district, within a few kilometers, things change so much, right? We also know that, especially in the system we work in, the role of a single person, a motivated principal, a motivated district education officer, can have an overwhelming trickle down effect on all the other stakeholders that they have, right? So therefore, while we can use positive deviance and negative deviance to actually study and examine what works and what we should be trying to do more of or trying to do less of. But again, I think the fear at the back of any qualitative researcher or evaluator, the fear is, are we actually placing undue importance on something that may be the exception to the rule, right? I think so.
Yeah.
That's definitely one fear that we all navigate. The other thing, I think, especially when we are working at scale, and organizations like us, there is definitely less connect to the ground, right? Because we are trying to work at a systems level. You are working with trying to influence the levers which bring about long lasting change and at scale. And therefore, the fear definitely is whether we are a lot of the conversations we have or when we go in are also more short term visits that we have, right? So when we are trying to kind of engage with the stakeholder, trying to understand their challenges, their lives, a lot of the methods we use are also by these focus group discussions or interviews, where we are just trying to spend a half a day with them and trying to understand their life story and hoping that they will actually tell us, be candid, tell us everything, etc., right? So I think the paucity of time sometimes when we are trying to do these exercises, we don't always have the luxury of trying to do an ethnographical kind of a study as such, right? So I think Therefore, that is one fear when operating at scale. Um, One way to navigate it, and I'm kind of jumping to possible solutions, is to try and think of more participatory ways of getting insights. Is there a way in which we can actually hear directly from the stakeholders themselves in their own voices? What kind of incentives, what kind of mechanisms that can be built in, which will allow more people to share, even our own team members for that matter, right? I mean, I think sometimes the best insights actually come from the team which is working on the field, right? And for whatever reason, they sometimes don't have a way to make sure that the central office, which is designing curriculum, learning experiences, is they actually able to hear those voices on time. Sometimes, most of the times, it actually happens that after everything's designed and they said, "Oh, I already knew this, that this won't work," right? So how do you kind of make sure that real time, in time insights are coming in? One of the ways in which we are trying to experiment with this is actually through um, more reflect building that practice of more reflection within our team members through journaling. um, Again, not everybody's comfortable with writing, so we're trying to kind of see whether through voice notes, picture notes, can we get more team members to become comfortable with just reflecting at the end of the day, putting their thoughts down. Is that something that teams, whether people who are engaged in developing edtech products, learning experiences, can actually sift through to draw more insights on? Obviously means a lot more work for the team, but I think that's where some of these can definitely add more value. So I think these are a couple of ways in which we can navigate when we are operating at scale. The other ways I think you already referred to, Yashna, in terms of sampling, even for qualitative studies or researches that we do, how do we make sure that it is also representative? Being aware all the time that who's in the room, who's outside the room, and therefore being able to question our own biases.
Yeah.
One way which we try and answer this is actually having maybe one or two different team members accompanying, or even going for the same field visits, being able to bounce and reflections off each other, so that the people who are also evaluating or researching are able to also reflect on their own judgments and biases that they may be bringing into the room. So I think these are some ways in which it has been done in the past, and some things that we are also trying to kind of use in our work. I'll stop here.
Yeah, I think just to also double as in highlight on what you said about um, there are so many insights with people who are actually working on ground, and survey data is like a one-off, right? And people can select the cream in some way, or like a sample which may not or may work, but this real time ongoing insights and having that culture within organizations to the teams who are actually working on ground to have the confidence that yes, this information is important, and it may be I may have shared something similar, but every instant with a person on ground might be unique, and it's important to flag that. We were in a training with one of the organizations who we work to capture stories, and their biggest, and we had this training with field teams, and their biggest hesitation was, we don't know if this story is going to inform anything, and just to break that, right, it took a lot of time, and we went in actually using those Bollywood film stories to say that every story is the same, but we all watch it because of that nuance, like how do you give the right details? It's not just about having a story at the beginning saying that yes, there was a problem, then we came and then it was solved. Like, really, what are the steps that were taken? What were the details of the problem? What was the child or the principal or the teacher facing, and then you can actually get into seeing how many times this has happened. Is it location specific? Is there any other hint which we can apply filters for, and seeing what are the insights coming from the ground. And this is, I feel like I spoke a lot, but Adhishree and Radhika, if you want to add to this point.
Sure. No, I think loved what everything Tanvi shared. It was just so real, and I could just imagine all the conversations, especially around the the way I think one of the challenges that I've kind of experienced is the way organizations are also structured. Who does the qualitative data analysis and who communicates it, right? So I think if in an ideal world, if Tanvi, Radhika, and I were like one team, I think that would be amazing, because this is what it is. This is what it needs. It needs, somebody who's got deep experience in partnership, deep experience in research, and then has a storytelling sort of bent. I think this is how organizations need to be structured. And I think that's when you can look at a story with the way you shared, Yashna, that okay, it's not just any story, it's got this component, it's got that component, and then feeding that back to people who are giving you that information so that they know where all of this is going. So it's not just some one-off kind of thing that I have to do, and then you come back with people telling you, oh, but I don't write, or I don't like to pause every day, and it becomes, you go into that territory which is hard to get out of. But then if you're constantly taking it back to them, saying, okay, this is how it's being used, and doing that internal round of communication, which will then go out to even say who you're getting the stories from or who you're fundraising from, etc. I think then that loop gets tight. But right now it's all happening in silos, and only it's kind of gone into this, oh, you have to be an expert to do this, and oh, I need sort of academic backing to do this. And I think that's where it's kind of gotten lost, and then it becomes like this black box that only a few organizations want to get into.
Yeah, I think one more important point that I feel I heard the hint for, so just sharing, just an organization we've recently started working on capturing qualitative data, and while initially there was a spurt of like, hey, I want to share, very soon they realized that it has to be built in the form of rituals. Like, I want to make sure that while I'm anyway doing those rituals as an organization. If there are teams on ground, I will be doing those meetings, I will be doing those check-ins. Like, at that time, can I make that as a habit to report, and be on surveys, of course. And I think it's important to establish that there are multiple types of call input, and what are these, how can they inform at different times with rituals and habits across the organization. Yeah, Radhika, over to you.
Sorry, there's a power cut, but miraculously the internet is still on. So yeah. So I think for us, there's two types of problems, quote unquote, with qualitative data. The first is actually people who are serious surveyors. I'm using a lot of air quotes because don't really trust qualitative data. Especially because, like you said, Yashna, size of the sample pool, or like you said, Tanvi, who's asking the questions, who's in the room, right? So all these things mean that there's less and less of it. There's very little of it done, and even if it is done, it's of questionable usability within an organization. But we're at this critical point where we've gone from measuring marks to in an academic support program to pivoting to a life skills program, where you cannot get away from qualitative assessments, right? And I think it forces us to, and I'm very happy that it forces us to actually take the learner into account. Because you can't measure confidence only externally. And NEP is talking about self-efficacy. It's how the girl feels about her capacity to do something, how confident she is to take something on, how ready is she to try a game that she's never played before. Right, these are all measures of growing self-confidence and self-efficacy. I'm repeating myself, but so for this to be valid, or to be not just valid, but to be able to cross it with observational data, like you were saying again, then how much of it is observational and how much is self-reported. And if you can actually cross those two, so you would have the teacher saying, I notice, Adhishree is participating more actively. And Adhishree also says, yes, I will try a game that I've never played before, allows us to then say, okay, this is now there are two data points that tell us, two qualitative data points, but they can be cross-referenced, and we can say that this is how a child is experiencing the program. So I think it's a good thing that we're being forced to, and of course, just to kind of double click on all your points of actually getting knowledge from the field in a steady, in a steady rate. I think that is key, and I think I saw it somewhere in the chat as well. This is something that we are hoping to build upon, so that we get timely knowledge and that it's actionable, because now it's not just anecdotal, but it can also be backed by how many instances there are of this particular thing.
Yeah. I think just also to this is something because we encountered Radhika while doing the survey that we had done, and the qualitative data came, and maybe we can talk in the questions a little more, but qualitative data came at the scale of 12,000 entries, and that's also a challenge. Like if suddenly something like that comes in, how do you really analyze and how do you really make sense of it? And if I mean, how we did was using some AI and tech, but I think that just also highlighting that being a big challenge, because it's daunting when you see that much data. Like, how do you really analyze that data is the key. And I think there are many technologies and advancements that have come in, which now at least enable somebody to have that, like you can actually dream of it, because it will happen, and people can do that at scale as well. So just wanted to share that challenge as well, since we're talking about challenges. I'm gonna skip one of the questions that we had, just looking at the time, but also going to talk about the shifts and really how can we shift the mindset towards valuing qualitative data in the sector. And Adhishree, you come from that background of comms and behavior change, and like you've done that and you've seen it happen across different organizations. So I'm just going to open it up for you, where like what are the resistances when you look at call data at the decision making level, and also how do you really navigate? I know you've been doing so much work with global school leaders at different levels with state, with countries, and how are you, if you can share a little about that, it'll be great.
Sure. I think a lot of it, Radhika covered with just sort of the skepticism around just considering it as something that you can put in the center of the table and design stuff around. And I think one of the shifts that's essential is to start looking at qualitative data as not secondary but strategic. So I think one of the things that we've started to do is of course, we have a ton of quantitative data that we're constantly looking at, both that we collect and that is available elsewhere as well. But I think the qualitative part of it helps us internally align on, okay, what is it that we want to do in this, right? The problem is big, it's complex, a lot of people need to get into it, but it kind of helps answer, so what, right? So what do we do about it? And I think that allows for a little bit of dialogue and kind of reading between the lines, so to speak, to say, okay, what are trends and patterns, etc. Especially because I think we are also sort of uniquely structured, where it's a small group of people designing program for like people all the way in the Bahia district of Brazil to like the Kalbi Desert in Kenya to like East Java. And it's really complicated because now you're thinking about language, you're thinking about culture, you're thinking about this culture of communication, right? So I think I saw somewhere in the chat where somebody said, yeah, but if they say what they feel, is it something that they're actually feeling? That's something that we're constantly asking, because there are certain cultures that are very upfront about it, and there are certain cultures who just do the double communication constantly, right? So the reliability of that is constantly under kind of the scanner, and that's something that you have to just figure out ways. And I think what Tanvi shared kind of goes in that direction, where it's more it's participatory, but it's also frequent. So it's not like that one moment. Yes, it's, the Asar has set the standard, but it's not like an Asar thing where, one point everybody kind of gathers and we listen, but you're kind of doing a trickle method. And I think the other bit is also around showing, like I said, going back to the, wearing the comms hat a little bit, is to go back and say, okay, what are we doing with this? Like, what does this mean for you who's sitting in that, room or on that table? Like, what does this actually mean? And I think one of the things that we saw is we host like a global community of school principals with UNESCO, and one of the reports was around sort of there are 14 million teachers that are needed. That's the gap in the world right now. Now you put that number again in front of people and they're like, okay, I don't know what to do with it. But I think what you can do through qualitative data is to understand, okay, why is this attrition happening? And so through sort of conversation, sampling, the usual focus group discussions, but also sort of using the platform like Principal Speak, we're realizing that, oh, it's attrition of, say, new teachers. Because in the first 2 years, they want really good managers, right? Like, I want a really good manager in the first 2 years of my career. And if they get a really shabby school principal, they're like, I'm out. I'd rather go and do something else. And so then it comes back to the school principal to say, okay, you have to probably think about supporting your year one and year two teachers a little differently. And so now we have designed a program to support school principals for year one, year two teachers specifically, right? And so I think that's the loop that we're constantly seeing. And then it's the role of, say, comms, and honestly, everybody does comms according to me, but say, if that's my role, then that's what kind of the role of comms, to really highlight that, okay, that's how this world works. And then slowly sort of shift, like, okay, it's not fully 100%, there's a lot of gaps, but you have to kind of do the mix method if you want to go, and you have to see, okay, where all can I get my data from? And like you said, Yashna, now start exploring AI in a way that's ethical and affordable also, to help with the stuff that is hard to kind of do.
Yeah, I think I also want to highlight something that I really appreciate global school leaders and your team essentially do, is that power of micro steps, and like really proving internally and externally of like, okay, let's start with this much and then proceed, and then and really that micro step, while I'm saying it as micro, it is a substantial step, but making sure that, okay, how can we start with 50 leaders who are going to really change that lens for the other 100 and 200 and 300 and 400, like, and getting to one country, the other, showing that visibility of like what from one country, what have we established, and then getting into at a state level, country level and such. So I feel that has honestly been a learning for us as well, while working with you, that how do you really gradually do it, and honest, and the latest platform, like what we've been seeing for Principal Speak, it's like today morning I was sitting with our team and we were just going through some of this, and we're like, how amazing that people have written with that much detail. It's just so good. And it all happened through that consistent efforts. I won't call them experiments because I know how much thought has gone in that, but consistent efforts on your team. So yeah, I think just wanted to highlight that effort that you all do. Yeah, I'll also open it out to Radhika and Tanvi for anything else that you feel in terms of mindset shift to value call data, even though there are those challenges. But this might be the right time also with the tech advancements to anchor it. But how do you think organizations can start?
We really
Uh,
sorry.
Go ahead, Radhika.
Because I've already spoken about this, which is that we have no choice but to now use it in our assessments.
Yeah.
So I think doing it well and doing it right will be the proof in the pudding. And we fully expect to have to change it and modify it because this is year one of using it in assessments. But yeah, we don't have a choice, and therefore I think it'll prove itself.
Yeah. Okay, noted. Tanvi.
I'm actually going to echo a comment that Abhi left on chat saying that uh, decision making requires both qual and quant data. I think certain type of qualitative insight, qualitative this thing needs to be backed up by quant data, and I think um, I'm just going to use a quick example just to illustrate. I think for us, right after COVID, again, we know a lot of learners, young age learners came online, etc. And again, through our fields, we started seeing that they were actually interacting with social media at a much younger age and pace and etc. And some kind of behavioral shift and was happening, right? I think for that that particular field visit, that particular insight then triggered a whole lot of questioning internally as well about what do we think the role of social media could be when we talk about life skills, right? And therefore that led to some kind of thinking that okay, maybe we need to have a more widespread study, we need to gather more insights with different types and representative groups, not just urban folks, etc. I think given the importance of this particular question that we're evaluating in this time, I mean, and while the spark of that might have been something that emerged from more interactions and in-depth conversations, has to be kind of backed up by certain types of data. So I think depending, I would say, I'm not definitely not discounting the value of qualitative insights and qualitative methodologies per se, but I think in certain cases, um, organizations' attitude and the value they place on the qualitative insights might also reflect in whether they're willing to invest in actually pursuing it through data lens as well. So yeah.
Yeah, yeah, that's a very, very valid point, and Abhi has actually put in pretty well. Just to also, I know we're taking questions later, but just what Shreya you've shared, it's often both ways. Like it sometimes is that I have quantitative data and I need the why behind it, and it often is, and sometimes it is I have call data and I need to validate the scale of it. So it depends how organizations have um, looked at evaluation, and then what do you need to do further to strengthen it to take that decisions. um yeah, I again, I think there was another question from this segment, but I will skip that because I feel we've answered a lot of that, which is on how does the sector need to integrate qualitative insights. I feel a lot of it has been answered. We're at 5:06. The rest remaining time was on question and answers. There's an opportunity for everyone to share their questions, and if something has been shared and we've not addressed, if somebody from Uloy could also help us with that. But to get us started, there are about few questions that we'd listed from the registration form. So I'm just going to start us with that. And if any one of you can essentially answer or add, there isn't much structure to this section, but just going to start with the first one, which was asked, was why should we rethink education evaluation, and what is the critical role of call data in the process? I think we've answered, but Radhika, if you want to add a little more to that, we can add, or maybe move to the next one very quickly.
Yeah, I'll be brief. I think qualitative data allows us to take the learner into account. Um, it's very easy to say, okay, she got 70% in maths or 60% in maths. But the why, like you said, Adhishree, it's like it allows you to understand the why of the how much, right? You can't simply just say this is what she got. You need to understand why she got that much. Did she enjoy it? Was it specifically was it difficult? Was the teacher not great? Is the language in which the question is being phrased too scholarly for a child that age to get it? Like there are so many layers to why something is landing well or not landing well. And usually, evaluations have been about how many, like, did she get it right or wrong?
Yeah.
And especially in an empowerment program like ours, it's not only about what mark she gets, but are we shifting community mindsets? So then the 360 degree becomes very, very important. understanding the role of teachers, understanding the role of parents, understanding the role of the community in enabling or not enabling the learning environment, of course, the physical environment, like you mentioned earlier. So I think it's important to really understand the context in which education is taking place. Just saying 60% is telling you something, but it's not telling you what you can fix.
Yeah, fair. Just going to the next question, which was in chat, I just got a message that we should address this. How can we, this is by Vanita Prabhu, how can we effectively address the challenges of ensuring the validity and reliability of qualitative data when evaluating educational programs, especially in diverse and resource constrained settings? Yeah, anybody who wants to take that?
I think I can try and answer that. I think Vinita, one way that we have kind of, Vanita, sorry, we've kind of tried to do that is to also think about how even qualitative methodologies could have some amount of representation as well, right? While we all know how sampling is done for quantitative data surveys, etc. I think similar approaches to ensure again that we are not excluding voices or representation in what we are gathering, what we are hearing, what we are processing or analyzing. I think that's one way in which we can do. I hear you. You qualified it by saying resource starved environments. How would that work? I think it's often in the case of qualitative data, we have looked at convenience sampling or kind of like a snowball sampling to garner insights, but it also lends itself to then more doubts creeping in terms of whether this is can be extrapolated to a larger population sample and things like that. I think those are some basic things that can be attempted where we are mindful of how we are even choosing who in a particular community can be looked at a key informant or a key person to interview or even be invited for a focus group discussion. The other bit I think we touched upon was the participatory approach. Um, I mean, I think a lot of this ends up becoming about using technology. In the past, we have tried to actually give youngish learners access to, mobile devices to actually help them to document their lives and tell us what stories they want to tell. But again, those are one-off exercises that we can try and do. Otherwise, I think we were aware that we were excluding a lot of large population which may not have access to devices. So doesn't work all the time is also our own learning experience from this process. But yeah, I mean, I think maybe it's complement that with the participatory approach to qualitative data gathering could be one way to uh, address this issue. I'll stop here.
Yeah, I think there was another question related to this in the registration, which was what are the effective sampling methods for analyzing large scale data during evaluation, and how can call data be included in these processes? And I'll also open this to Radhika first, just because of the scale that you actually evaluated on. So just if you can talk to that.
Yeah. So, like I mentioned before, we have 6,500 centers that we run in 5,000 schools. So, it was important for us to have a sample size that made sense. So, we did a random sampling, which was 10% of these centers. We made sure that in every district that we operated, that we had 10% of random. And then we picked 10% of the best performing using our internal KPIs. So that was a quantitative data enabled sampling. So we looked at the best performing and we took 10% of those, and the least performing, the ones that were trailing behind the rest as well. So, and the reason for this is to be able to actually learn something out of it, because like I briefly touched upon, our survey was a 360-degree survey. So we were looking at key informants, we were looking at principals, parents, neighbors, the children themselves and the tutors that taught them. So 5 types of interviews. And therefore, it made sense for us to be able to look at it from from each of these angles. It didn't make sense just to do a random. We wanted to see what was working well, and if we were able to tease out enabling factors and so on. So, and then we analyzed obviously in buckets, and then we looked at how across each one of the indicators that we picked, how the 3 samples were stacking up, district-wise and then state-wise as well. So yeah. And just to touch upon the qualitative part of it, usually surveyors will leave out if, in the options, there's always, A, B, C, D, and then if other, please specify. And I think even Yashna was saying, like drop them. What are you going to do with all this data? But actually now, like you said, Yashna, it's possible to do something with it. So we used it in in only a couple of places, and we were able to create hotspots, word clouds, basically, which allowed us to see what factor appeared more often than not in a response to a particular kind of question, right? Because usually what happens is when you want to know, for example, I want to ask the Nanikali why she comes to the center. Like, what does she enjoy most, right? And if I put in, you like math, you like English, you like, you like the teacher, you don't want to sit at home and do housework, I'm forcing her to pick one of these, right? And I do not have the capacity to, I'm not allowing her to speak. So by having this and, the other, please specify, I'm actually allowing her to speak and tell me what really works. So we used it sparingly, but it allowed us to actually, on key questions, to figure out why things are working or not, as the case may be.
Yeah. Adhishree, anything, or I can move on to the next one? Super. I think one more question which was in chat, which was quite interesting, which is on how to push boundaries beyond numbers with funding agencies who want impact mainly in numbers with the story only to support data. Yeah, I think it's one of the critical ones, and something we may have the answers for, but or may not, but I'll just open it out to you all.
A related point, there are lots of funders now in the philanthropy space who are doing capacity building and, for communications, for internal team capacity building and so on. So I think it's changing. I don't think it's going to be in the CSR kind of quantum, but in the philanthropy kind of quantum, we are seeing a change already.
Tanvi, you had something.
I was saying, in our experience, and again, a bit different organization, I think it's a journey sometimes. We've had a profile of funder who were very number focused when they started working with us, but over time, I think it's also about our role is also to possibly inform and educate them alongside as they take this journey along with us, right? Um, I think it is an evolving relationship. I think it also I'm cognizant of the fact that there is sometimes a power hierarchy that we experience in these relationships. So not always possible to drive it, but I think with persistence and patience, sometimes it does work. Um, we've had funders actually ask me quite recently, saying where is the last time you actually heard something that really surprised you about an after the evaluation, right? Saying where they were coming from was saying that are we doing evaluation for the sake of evaluations or actually trying to uncover something that does not existed as a knowledge pool in the sector, right? So there are, as Radhika mentioned, some funders organizations which are looking to kind of add more insights value to the sector at large, not just from the point of getting numbers and proof point, but yeah, I think the profile of the and the nature of the regulatory environments that they're working on. CSR funders, we do know, have more constraints that they need to follow. But yeah, I think it's also an evolution of a journey. At least that's been our experience. I'll stop here.
Adhishree, anything to add? Yeah, I think just to also share some of the experiences that we've had, often, as Radhika very well pointed out, philanthropies and foundations are moving already towards, and we've been seeing how they're also supporting um, organizations to really look at call, and call can be call first, con after, or con first, call after. So it's very different as we on how organizations approach this, but it definitely is like a combination, and it never is like I want to evaluate only with qualitative data and I want to evaluate only with quant. Like how and philanthropies are, I mean, foundations are definitely seeing this change, and they're also advocating for it from what we've heard. And as Tanvi said, it's going to be a process with the other funding organizations because, but definitely there are some in the years that we've also worked, we've been seeing that change. Like people are caring for qualitative impact because many organizations are making that validation, like, and making that, like, with whatever small steps they're taking, they're essentially taking that one step forward, showing that there's a lot you can do with call. So yeah, but I guess there's no one answer to yes, this is the strategy and the secret sauce of how to get funders to this. So yeah, I will take only one last question in case there's something on chat that I've missed. Otherwise, I'll just open out one of the questions which came in the registration process. How can NGOs translate localized qualitative insights into scalable strategies for broader education initiatives? Yeah, I feel we've touched a little upon that. But in case anybody wants to add something, something to that will be great.
If there are no takers, I'll speak only about one little thing that we did. I told you the story of going and listening to parents talk about how their girls had traveled and because of the sports program and how that was shifting perspectives. So what we did with this is to actually look at asking parents and communities across, what is it that you like about the sports program? This was through different types of FGDs that we had across across many locations, and we realized that the aspiration of travel was really the key point, right? Like nobody was talking about how many goals the team scored. Nobody was talking about how fast the girl ran. It was always वो वाराणसी गई है, वो दिल्ली तक गई है, वो दार्जिलिंग तक गई है. You know, it was very so this we realized was something that made and sometimes these are fathers talking about their daughters who had and in the most rural villages of the country. So if perceptions can shift because a girl has traveled, then we must make this more accessible to all girls. So we've actually now part of our program, part of the sports program is to have an travel for girls for a one day, like a hike thing, or an overnight stay that includes them traveling somewhere. And this is for all girls, because this being this mobility seems to be building a support for girls going out and doing things. So yeah, we've actually already implemented from this insight. It's now part of program design.
Thanks for sharing that. Just one last question that Abhi has shared. So just we'll read that out. A few days ago, I was talking to people from MSDF, and they were saying that they should do pick up and choose by streamlining the processes with the schools done in 2 years because they have to scale. So the basic question is, how do you feel about education? Is it contextual, or can we actually bucketize some practices done in 2 or 10 schools and copy paste it to all schools?
I can make an attempt. Again, personal views here. Yeah, I mean, I think the challenge, or at least personally, I feel, is that we've had these islands of excellence, right? Where we know these exceptional schools. It's how do you make sure that the tide is also raising all the boats, right? So I hear you on saying that, we can't take models that are contextualized, designed, etc., for and really rested in the local flavors, etc., and scale it to all this. But I also feel that as a country with this particular population, this sector, we also owe it to make sure that it's not something that ends up not including all these uh, other young people that we have. Um, to your point of saying that, are there certain good practices, certain things that this particular 10 schools have done really well, which can be scaled? How do you choose those particular five that can work? But I think I would say personally, I would give it an attempt, but at the same time have the humility of say it's not working. Can I actually roll it back, right? And sometimes we don't have that luxury of saying that you're okay so further down the road that it's not working, but you're not willing to change the course. That's where the danger is. But yeah, I think personally would like to see more and more islands being connected to each other rather than existing in pockets and isolation. So that's my view. I'll stop here.
Yeah, I can quickly add, and I agree. It's a tricky bit because um, I think at the foundation, all schools and because we work with Global South schools are copy paste by design, right? Because of the colonial kind of inheritance. So by design, it's a copy paste system already, and then you have to try and contextualize it. So there's some room of dialogue and exploration there. But we've also seen that, earlier I was talking about this. Global community of school principals that we have. There are about thousands of them, and they come together once a month, and they are just hungry, right? They don't care. Like, there's a school principal in Argentina who's picking up something that a school principal in the Adilabad district in India is doing, and she's not thinking about, oh my God, is this copy? She's like, no, I just want to know how to bring parents to my PTA meetings, right? It's like, I've tried everything, it's not working, so tell me what to do. And so at that level, there is copy pasting happening there. And then it makes you think that, okay, what we've designed for these school principals in Adilabad district, like there are 4 or 5 resources, what if we actually gave them to the school principals in Argentina? And see, and of course, like Tanvi said, there's humility to say that, okay, it may or may not work, or it has to be contextualized. But I think I think to just constantly go back into the hole of no, everything has to be custom designed, I think there's just no time for it. I think the challenges are just mounting. It's not possible to wait for that uh, constantly tailorized sort of approach. And you have to begin at a basic level of, okay, copy pasting, and then you build layers that are contextual. And that's how I think you move forward. Otherwise, we're just going to be in this, I don't know, cynical world where nothing works. And so I think that's kind of the way forward, I think.
Yeah, I'd like to actually support both what Tanvi and Adhishree said on this. It's to have a program at scale, you have to standardize to a large extent, right? You can't ask every single district to design its own program from scratch. It's not going to work. A lot of things. So the genius of program design is in figuring out what should be the spine that is common and what should be left to the context. And it will be trial and error. We will get things wrong. But I think for scale, you have to have a lot of, first, you need to be pretty humble about what you can achieve at scale. You can only do one or two things really well at scale. You cannot do everything well at scale. So fine tune what that spine is that is going to be common, and then leave space for local context to define the rest. Yeah, otherwise, like Adhishree said, we're not going to get anywhere because we can't build everything from first principles all the time.
Yeah. Super. Thank you for answering. I think there were a lot of insights there. Yeah. Just also, we're on time. We have a minute left, so I won't take too much more time of everyone, but just want to thank, first of all, thank you everyone for joining, and thank you to Adhishree, Radhika, Tanvi for taking this time out. Personally feel it was an amazing, amazing, insightful conversation. Just to wrap up, like we spoke a lot about how do you really use call data, how do you inform qualitative insights and decision making, combination of mixed method, and how do you really use mixed method to inform any kind of decision making. So just I think there was a lot of insights. I personally feel I need to go through it again, so I'm glad we're recording this, but we'll also be sharing this with everyone, so in case you want to refer to this or share it out with other folks who you think might benefit from this conversation. But just once again, thank you so much for taking this time out and having this discussion with us, all three of you. It has been amazing. And I think what Adhishree said, it'll be amazing to have you all work together on something. And we'd love to see that happen, because there at time, I mean, it's very rare how it all clicks. And we thought this would be a great panel. So I'm glad you all came together to have this discussion. Thank you everyone for joining. We won't take more time. We probably will be ending this Zoom just to make sure we're on track. But if anything, you can even email us. You can, we'll be sharing some resources. So whatever we've discussed, we'll be going through that on chat. If somebody else has shared, we'll be sharing everything over email.